Good day, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to another Warframe guide. Today, we are doing, by popular demand, Hydroid, the master of tentacles and Japanese schoolgirls' worst nightmares. If you've ever seen a Japanese anime, then you'll know exactly where this frame comes from. So we're going to take a look at all that makes Hydroid what he is, but before we do make sure you give a look at my social media and a link to my Twitch down below. Go give us a follow on all those good sites and such, and that'd be gratefully appreciated. If you want to come and join us, we do stream these sorts of videos on a day-by-day basis, and it'd be great to see you there, so come and check it out sometime. First things first, let's find out where good old Hydroid comes from. So, Hydroid comes from Oro on Earth, from Councillor Vahek. This assassination is a bit of a long old slog, but you can make a nice little skip. Basically, rather than fighting Vahek in the individual locations you find him in, just run ahead to the very end of the map and he will just skip right to the very end. It makes life much easier for farming this. The individual components for the chassis and the neuroptics have a 38.72% chance of dropping. The systems have a 22.56% chance of dropping. And currently, Hydroid Prime is not vaulted, and he is obtained from the relics that will be listed up there somewhere. So if you fancy grinding for him, now's a good time, because he will probably eventually be vaulted within the next year. To make the individual components of Hydroid, for the neuroptics you will need 15,000 credits, 150 alloy plates, you will need 1 control module, 150 polymer bundles, 2 argon crystals. To make the chassis you'll need another 15,000 credits, 1,200 nanospores, 1,000 polymer bundles, and 300 Rubico, along with another 2 argon crystals. For the systems you'll need 15,000 credits, 1 Orokin cell, 4 gallium, 500 polymer bundles, and 220 alloy plates. And then constructing the entire thing, once all those pieces are done, you'll need 25,000 credits and an Orokin cell to go with it as well. Much like the Prime version, again, you'll need 15,000 credits for each individual component, 25,000 credits for making the main frame. However, for making the main frame now, you'll need 5 Orokin cells, and then you'll need 5 neural sensors for the neuroptics, 1,100 plastids, 8,750 alloy plates, 12,750 nanospores, 2 argon crystals for the chassis, 5 gallium, 10,500 salvage, and 6,750 ferrite. And then for the systems, you'll need 2 nitane, 10 control modules, 1,300 circuits, and 925 cryotic. Normal Hydroid will start with 300 HP, 375 shields, 200 armor, 188 energy, and 1.5 and will come with 2 polarities and an aura polarity in his aura slot. And then the Prime variation will come with 300 HP, 525 shields, 250 armor, 255 energy, and 1.5 speed, as well as polarities in his, 4 polarities in his regular slots, and an aura polarity as well. Hydroid's passive is Deep Tendril. Slam attacks using your melee weapon have a 50% chance to summon a tentacle that lasts for 15 seconds. This is not affected by power strength or duration mods, and you can spawn 3 tentacles at any given time. My recommendation is get a good amount of height and then use a slam attack of such, and then hopefully, eventually, you'll summon one of your good old tentacle buddies here. These do, in fact, integrate as a normal tentacle from one of your later abilities, so extra tentacles are always good. You might be seeing a bit of a trend here, by the way. Hydroid's one is called Tempest Barrage. Tempest Barrage is a channeled ability that will call down a strike onto the area designated within a 10-meter radius for 5 seconds. Holding down 1 charges the ability for up to 2.5 seconds, increasing the barrage duration and the damage dealt by each volley. These shots will land in consecutive strikes, and again last longer the longer that it has been charged for. These strikes will hit for 150 base damage and 300 once charged. The missile damage themselves are powered by the power strength of your frame, and the damage of these is based on impact damage, and the knockdown is also dealt within a 5-meter area of that initial impact. So can actually act as a decent amount of crowd control as well. 4 missiles will launch every second, so again, the more duration you have and the longer this lasts for, the more missiles that you'll be launching. So again, this is affected by power strength, the duration will help this last longer, and the explosion radius is also affected by range as well. The actual radius of knockdown is, however, not affected by that, and using natural talent will also increase the time, or sorry, lower the time that it takes to then cast this ability as well. The augment for Tempest Barrage is called Corroding Barrage. There'll be a little flare up here somewhere to show you this augment. This augment is very simple. Each projectile has a 100% chance, once fully leveled, to inflict corrosive damage. Corrosive damage, which in turn will allow you to mitigate the armor of your enemies, and then be nice for your team to help increase the damage everything you're going to do against armored enemies. So if you cast it long enough, eventually they will run out of armor, assuming the corrosive proc's high enough. There you go. So there's the armor, all gone now. Very useful augment. Good in utility with a composition where you're fighting high armored enemies, such as grenade targets like arid gunners, for example. Hydroid's 2 is Tidal Surge. Hydroid transforms into liquid and surges forwards as a wave of water. Whilst traveling, Hydroid is invulnerable and has his speed increases over the 30-meter trajectory of this surge of water. The length of time of the surge generally lasts for 1 second. Enemies hit within 6 meters of the surge will be ragdolled and pulled along with the surge. Any enemy hit by the surge will be dealt 300 impact damage as the wave travels, and once the wave hits a wall, any enemy still within the surge will be dealt 300 slash damage, which can be very nice. All damage is affected by ability strength. The slash damage component diminishes with the distance and is affected by body part multipliers. Wave speed is affected by ability duration, while the travel duration is not. Striking radius is affected by ability range, while traveling in waveform, activating Undertow halts Hydroid in its current location. So for example, maybe not want to go off the edge with this one. Activating things like Undertow or other abilities will cause Hydroid to stop mid-cast. And while you're traveling in waveform, any attempt to move your trajectory will not work. You're basically set in the path you're heading. Tidal Surge's augment is called Tidal Impunity. Tidal Impunity clears status effects and grants 6 seconds of proc immunity for yourself and allies that come in contact with it. So whilst your allies are fighting off hordes of grenade targets, anything they're affected by can then be immunized by using Tidal Surge, as well as giving them the proc immunity to any further status effects, which is quite nice, again, for some utility and some supportive role therein. Hydroid's 3 is Undertow. Undertow is a very simple and straightforward ability with a bit of complexity to it. Undertow, when activated, submerges Hydroid into a pool of water with a 4-meter radius. Any enemy that comes within range of this Undertow is then sucked into the abyss of water. Enemies that are taken down into the water are then suspended and invulnerable. They will be taking 25 impact damage per second whilst in this state, as well as taking 2% of their maximum health as impact damage, which continuously stacks for every enemy that is taken into this pool. The base damage increases per affected enemy is affected by ability strength. The radius in which you have of your pool is affected by the range, and the time it takes for you to delve into the depths and become a puddle is affected by natural talent. Submerged enemies receive increased damage proportionate to the number of enemies inside Undertow. Now, allied players can also then shoot the puddle and deal 50% of their bonus damage to the weapons that they then deal to it. So as an ally then shoots the puddle, the enemies within said puddle will then start taking damage as well. While submerged, Hydroid can then left-click on targets that are around him and pull them into the puddle. Whilst in this state, moving and being in puddle mode will drain energy. Every additional use of your left-click to tug in an enemy within 25 yards will also drain an additional form of enemy. You are still able to cast abilities whilst in this mode, like Tidal Surge and your 1, for example. And then coming back out of this will cause any enemies to then be ejected as well. The grab range of your tentacle is affected by ability range. And Undertow will drain 2 energy per second and will remain active as long as Hydroid has energy, or until you decide to do a roll of some kind or you jump. Undertow's augment is called Curative Undertow. This augment is very simple. You activate your puddle, and any ally that is then stood within your puddle will regenerate 30% of their health every 1.5 seconds for the length of time of your puddle. Combining this with the augment for your 2 to give status immunity is also very advisable, as you can use them in conjunction to then give status immunity as well as the healing over time. Very good. Have you ever wanted to summon a Kraken? Have you ever wanted to destroy everyone and show just how much you love hentai? Well, Hydroid's 4 may just very well be for you. Tentacle Swarm is Hydroid's 4. Hydroid summons a Kraken. causing 10 tentacles to emerge from all surfaces within a 5-meter radius. Cast over an unrestricted range, tentacles prioritize spawning beneath enemies, like so. Assuming it had energy. This is a channeled ability, and once channeled to full, will deal more damage and hit a wider area. On its initial cast, it will deal 300 magnetic damage per hit and last for 20 seconds. Once channeled, the area will increase further than the initial 5 meters. The enemies that are then lifted up into the air are ragdolled and subsequently dealt that 300 damage every second, as well as 200 true damage per second as well, which goes through shields and everything of that nature. This is a great crowd control maneuver that will also add to a lot of the way you play as Hydroid, and is one of the main facets to using Hydroid across the board. So if we show this again, for example, the tentacle magnetic damage and true damage per second are affected by ability strength, while the number of active tentacles are not. The only thing that will add to the overall tentacles are the passive that you are able to generate through your hitting the ground with a slam attack. Like so. The spawn radius is affected by ability range, the duration of this is affected by your duration mods, and tapping the button once casts the ability immediately, but charging it obviously then gives you a much wider range to use. The augment for this is called Pilfering Swarm. Now, very simply put, the Pilfering Swarm allows any enemies held by the tentacles to have a chance of dropping additional loot. Now, this is one of the augments that people will most use with Hydroid, as extra loot is always good. So, when it comes to how you use this, you'll want to use it when there are as many enemies around as possible to get it to spawn underneath them. It'll knock them up, it'll hold them in place. So this is one of Hydroid's main facets that you want to take advantage of. And last but not least, let's take a look at some builds. Now, Hydroid is a very simple frame to build. There's no real depth, there's only a couple of things you can really do with him. You're either going to be playing for his Pilfering Swarm, in which case you'll be looking at a build like this, which is based around duration and range. Now, you're going to be building this based around the map. In a more open environment, you're going to want to build more range to exploit it, to be able to have your tentacles spread out. So you'll be basing the range specifically about how you want to play. So with the build that we're using here, we're going to use Corrosive Projection to add that corrosive damage to reduce armor. The aura can basically be whatever. Energy Siphon can be quite nice as well. And as it stands, the mods that are not based on range I'm using is Continuity for that duration, Narrow-Minded for a bit of extra duration, Constitution for more duration. You might be seeing a bit of a trend here. Duration is key. You want these tentacles to last as long as possible so that you can keep the crowd control going for as long as possible as well. Prime Flow, or just regular flow to add that extra energy so you can keep casting abilities, so you can combine your 1 and your 2 and your 3 as much as you would like. Pilfering Swarm is the augment. There's not really much use of using the other augments with this build, as you want to specifically focus on Pilfering Swarm. Intensify is not needed for this build, however, the tentacles can actually do a large sum of damage with a little bit of power strength added into them. This can be changed out for Vitality if you're doing slightly higher level missions, but if you want to clear low level missions in a slightly more easy way, this tends to be quite nice just to add in there for that little bit of extra potency. And then Stretch and Cunning Drift are the current ranged mods I'm using. If I wanted extra range, I could swap out something else. Normally I'd either swap out Constitution or Augur Message, and just put more range in there if I was playing on a much larger map. In terms of the other builds you can play, this one sort of focuses more on your Undertow and your Tidal Impunity augment. This is going to be making use of your Puddle and your Undertow and your Tidal Surge. So what you want to do here is you want to prioritize a bit more survivability with a bit of efficiency so you can cast the abilities consistently, and then you would change out the augment based on how you would want to play. So Curative Undertow if you want healing, Tidal Impunity if you want to combine that in there as well. You might replace Augur Message for that instead, just to combine the two. You could also, with this, put in Corroding Barrage. This could, in theory, work with the Pilfering Swarm move as well. So you could put that in place of Augur Message just to get the potency from having constant corrosive damage in your attacks. As the one, as your one does do a fair amount of damage, and obviously Tempest Barrage is not a bad ability. It does fall off quite heavily at high levels, but the main thing with Hydroid's builds is you're focusing on spamming your abilities and making sure that they're up as much as possible. So look at Hydroid in one of two ways. Loot and crowd control, support, and utility. Hopefully this guide has been somewhat informative for you and you found it useful to understanding Hydroid. Again, he is a very simple frame, and I've probably missed something down the line with him, but hopefully this gives you a good understanding of his basics. If you have liked the video, do leave a like, share it to your friends, tell your family and all that kind of good stuff, and I would super appreciate it. And if you would like to come and join us on our Twitch stream sometime, we'd be happy to see you. And hopefully we'll see you top hatters in the next video. Ta-ra!